Welcome to the Love Your Life and Yourself podcast, the weekly show where science meets soul and mom chaos meets mind mastery. You're not just a mom. You're a woman with dreams, a career, a body that needs care, and a soul that craves more. This podcast is your permission slip to stop surviving and start thriving in motherhood, health, career, and stress resilience. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Rath, and every week we bring you actionable insights and transformative conversations to help you create a life you truly love. From evidence-based wellness strategies to authentic self-discovery, we'll explore what it takes to thrive through expert interviews and real unfiltered stories. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to Love Your Life and Yourself podcast, where we're all about transforming mom chaos into mindset mastery and living a life you truly love. It is a very special day today. We have Dr. Matthew Loop with us. And Dr. Matthew Loop is a best-selling author of Social Media Made Me Rich, an investor, NASDAQ speaker, and highly sought-after social media profit strategist. He's helped business owners and health experts multiply their monthly income by harnessing powerful platforms like TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Google, and Instagram. Since the MySpace days in 2005, he's trained over 43,000 business owners in 25 different countries. Millions have viewed his free growth tutorials online. Matthew's public speaking events are attended by thousands of high achievers and forward thinkers annually. Welcome, Matthew.
Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it. Great to speak with you today.
Yeah, and I can attest to your bio. I actually saw you, it would have been close to 10 years ago at a
San Diego.
chiropractic.
Yeah.
Yep, at a chiropractic event. And I've coached with you. I've been in your masterminds. I've learned so much from you. And it's such an honor to have you. You guys are in for a treat. You guys, he's really an expert when it comes to marketing and strategy. So yay. Welcome. So I always like to start off my guest episodes as the podcast is called Love Your Life and Yourself. So what does loving your life and yourself mean to you, Dr. Matthew?
I think that's a beautiful title and very simplistic, right? I think it's important to create a life and a business that you love. For me, flexibility is really important. Involving my family in the business, so almost having that harmony aspect. And I think that when that's done, it's a lot easier to, even if you love what you do in the practice or the business, and if you're like, we love to travel a lot, for instance, that's at the really high level for me. If I can travel with my family, have great experiences, introduce them to new countries, new people, and then I can still do everything that I want to do on my terms, I think that that's a very, when I think of loving my life, that's kind of what I think of, right?
I love that. I mean, you kind of mentioned a little bit about what your mastermind is about, which we can get to that a little bit later, but flexibility, family, and that freedom you're talking about of traveling with your family. So, and I think a lot of people strive for that. And it's really cool that, we have someone here that's done it. And so I would like to jump into kind of your story. You started as a practicing chiropractor, and now you are a multi-serial entrepreneur. So what did that success look like for you when you were running this thriving chiropractic practice, but then you had this like definite shift when you stepped into kind of a bigger stage online? Share with us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so when I went to chiropractic school, once I heard about the science, art, and philosophy, just changed my life. I said, this is what I need to be doing. And it's a very internally fulfilling, rewarding profession because you help people that no one else can help. It's an amazing thing overall. And once I got out of school, you have this big heart, you want to help people, but you also realize you're in business and you need to set goals for yourself and things of that nature. So I was helping a fair amount of people, but I thought success to me at that point in time is, man, if I could see 100 patients a week, that would be the coolest thing ever. I would have a busy practice and be doing well financially. And then, I only worked at the time, I think it was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So it was still a pretty flexible schedule from an in-office standpoint. That's what was really key for me. And then, of course, I wanted to be able to grow that by leaps and bounds. We all have our specific journeys. It wasn't always easy by any means. I didn't get business training in school. The background that I came from was a lower middle class family. My parents did the best they could with the information that they were given, and I was just like a lot of doctors and professionals, or just people that have jobs. They trade time for money, and I seemed to knew very early on that was a losing game, and I wanted to practice because I wanted to practice. That would seem like the ultimate freedom. I mean, I loved practice, but if I could do it, if I wanted to do 4 hours a week and spend a month in Colombia, for example, with my wife, or whatever, that sounded pretty cool. And I really started to shift where I started to be more creative about designing my ideal life. A few years after I would say MySpace took off, or for those that might not be familiar, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time in practice, and then right around 2005, 2006, you had MySpace, YouTube that crept up, social media's infancy, embryonic stage. I got really good at using it to build my office, and then other chiros initially were coming to me and saying, "Hey, what are you doing? Can you show me how to do this?" And they thought it was a kids network, and I began showing them how to grow and attract people into their offices. And that turned into like an accidental consulting career because that was cutting into my practice time. And I thought, I got to take what's up here and figure out how to put it into a training
Mm-hmm.
or a course.
Yeah.
And it wasn't as easy as it is today. You had to piece together 4 to 6 different things, and but I figured it out, and it was life changing. So my trajectory set off more so on the consulting side of the equation, and then I knew, but going back to the flexibility standpoint, I said, well, this is actually giving me some degree of flexibility where I can practice when I want, but I'm selling these online courses, and I felt like I was meant for a bigger stage anyway, very early on, but I never knew kind of where that path would go. But if I thought if I could help thousands of doctors reach millions of patients, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I love that because it wasn't a pivot out of burnout, which I think a lot of people have. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm burnt out. I need to pivot. But you kind of led this intuitive sense of yourself of like, I feel like it just was more of like an easier evolvement for you versus like, oh, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out. And it was just more of an ideal life from what I so what was there anything like internally, and I feel like you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but talk to me through like some of the maybe the conversations that you have or some like internal calling that you had even when things were working out.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of us go through this sometimes. We know we're just capable of a lot more, but we don't have all the tools, the resources, or the relationships. And I was just very naive when I got out of school. I began to then immerse myself and read books like E-Myth, Robert or Michael Gerber's E-Myth, where he talks about the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur, all the sides of the business, and that the entrepreneur is very neglected. Most people are mules, for lack of a better word. They're good technicians in the business, but that's not going to give you the business or the life that you want from that standpoint. I also got my hands on psychology, or influence the psychology of persuasion, Robert Cialdini, talking about why people made purchase behavior. And I just began to see through the lines a little bit where I felt like I could have more influence and ultimately bring more abundance into my life, help other people. And then as my online courses and training started to really take off, I kind of did a deep dive, and I started to set better intention and set goals. And we all, at least I did, coming from the background that I did, you've got this internal and external programming that it subconsciously weighs you down almost to
Mm,
where the actions that you take, you think you're being successful, but you're just going off of what your parents or their grandparents did, and you're not pushing yourself to get into bigger and better rooms, into uncomfortable situations. And so that's where I just had the idea to have this shift, and I just knew if X person, for example, I saw this gentleman, he's doing this, like master marketer and copywriter and this and that. And I was pretty good at social media at the time, but there were no manuals around 2005, 2006. But I knew I had to piece together something else. I'm like, well, I need to get as close to this guy as I can somehow. I don't care what it costs, but I got to figure this game out. And I knew that when I was reading newsletters like Dr. Mercola and whatnot, I was like, why can't I throw these away? Of course, it's great information, but like I didn't come to find out he's a master copywriter and whatnot. And you just piece together all these little tools and you get around the right people, and it exponentially multiplies not just your success but the way that you think, because you're thinking like you're not thinking at your 2.0 level at that particular stage. It's like, okay, well, I didn't even know I could hire somebody to do work for me this way. I didn't know that there was a system that I could scale, like predictable system, right? I mean, it says for you and I, it's kind of common sense now, but I don't know where I was going with that tangent, but
I love it. No, I think it's super powerful because I haven't even launched this podcast as we're speaking right now. It launches in a couple days as we're speaking. And our first couple episodes are all about the belief and all about your thoughts and how your thoughts create your reality. So when you're surrounded by those other people, you start thinking in different ways. And instead of getting to a place of, what's the word I'm looking for? Of like sheer exhaustion and like just burnt out, you actually come from a place of vitality and a place of abundance where you can create the things. And so that's a really great transition into this question of, now you're in a different business. Now you don't practice anymore. You haven't for how many years? You haven't practiced for a long time.
it's so I had the practice up until 2020, but I had independent
Okay.
contractors that were in the
Okay.
office, so I was rarely there. And basically, I mean, it was kind of a passive income source at that stage. But I decided like we don't really need this. Let's break it. But in terms of full-time practice, no. Or Christmas will come around and I get the whole clinic in the family, the community service, right?
Yes, I still do that today, which is totally okay. So you haven't, yes, so you haven't been in practice. Your business has really shifted. You're full time into this marketing, but even since you've dived into like the courses and the marketing and teaching and one-on-one coaching, you've even transitioned in, or I should say grown, maybe not transition because you're still doing that, but added, buying and selling businesses, real estate, investments, etc. So there's this belief about visibility and marketing and being seen. So how did you have to outgrow, or how did you have to outgrow to show up to that next level? And how did that belief first really start to get wired in?
Yeah, part of it was understanding that I was being the mule, not the magician, like
Mm.
one of my mentor Mark Evans says, right? It's like if
Mm-hmm.
you want to get to the next level, you have to empower other people to help you along the journey, or else you're going to hit a ceiling from that standpoint. Now, social media wise, I realized early on that organic wasn't predictable, and so I was like, I got to figure out this paid traffic game, how to like put a dollar into the ATM and turn it into two, three, to five, or 10, because then it becomes predictable and I can drive 1,000 visitors a day to this offer, to this whatever it is, convert a certain percentage of those. So I like to get everything down to a science. But for sure, I think the most important things that I personally had to learn was the art of delegation, the art
Mm.
of copywriting, which is basically turning words into money. I mean, if you're talking to people, you're persuading them or you're being persuaded. One or the other. Online, words are very important, and to get people to watch your content, to get people to take the next step to opt into your free guides and all this other stuff. So it was important for me to understand that process and why people made the decisions that they made. And then I said, well, let me be able to, how do I certainly scale this now? Because, I have my email list and I'm building that constantly. But if I evolve into paid advertising, whether it's Facebook, Google, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it might be, I can just turn it on, turn it off when I want, have a steady stream, and then eventually hit the critical mass tipping point. So I think that was a game changer from a mindset shift of my own. And I wanted to comment on your point on the previous conversation just real quick, is that one of the healthiest things that I ever did was when I went to an event. I saw a gentleman, his name was Frank Kern, pretty big into the direct marketing, copywriting, direct response world. And he did $1 million in a day with a launch of one of his products.
Wow.
And I looked at him, and I just looked, And I said, he's a very smart guy. I'm pretty smart too. There's no way, like, I'll give myself a year. I can do at least 1/10, $100,000 online in the next year. And that was extremely a healthy comparison, and I blew that out of the water actually in the
Mm-hmm.
year. But I said, and I know that some people say you shouldn't compare yourself, and I totally get that. Because somebody's 5.0, I mean, it took them how many years to get there versus where you're starting out. But I find that comparisons can also motivate you. Like in that situation for me, and I said, I can figure this out. I'm pretty smart. I have these systems, and I know to be in the right rooms with those that are already doing it. And I wanted to comment on that because it's so. I think healthy comparisons are very important.
Yeah, you're talking to the comparison queen. Have you ever done the strength finders? Like, comparison is one of my top five strengths. And it can be like there's always a pro and a con, right? But I love that because, sometimes we always compare and then have this shame or guilt, but to use the comparison to really kind of motivate you yourself to do better, to ask more of yourself and to grow, I think is a super healthy way to use that. So there's quite a few business owners that are listening, and you've coached thousands of people, whether it's from on stage or one on one. So you've really seen this like internal part of a lot of different businesses. And what is a pattern that you often see in entrepreneurs, whether that's, an at-home business, just making a couple $100 a month for that, maybe the stay-at-home mom, to, high level 7, 8 figure businesses. So, what's the pattern that you see often in entrepreneurs who want freedom but are still kind of stuck in that hustle? What do you coach for their first shift and move them from that hustle into more of a freedom?
I think it also is important though and if you're entering the space, if you're in business right now, that's fantastic. I love and admire that. But I think too many times we fall into the trap of we see X person, X guru online, and we're like, okay, well, and they might have great strategies, tips, and ideas or whatnot. But then we follow these people and their mentality, and I know a good amount of influencers, and if an 80-hour work week is not for you, then you need to be very selective about who you follow. Does that person, number one, do they have the systems,
Mm,
protocols, and processes in place that do allow them freedom and flexibility? Because which you might find, I mean, it's again, everyone has different wants and needs and goals, and that's totally fine. But if your goal is true freedom and flexibility, you need to understand, does this individual on the surface level, maybe they might have it, but internally, they're just some entrepreneurs. They can't shut it off. Now, some of them like that. They're always on a quest for more. They barely sleep. They're doing all this, but then what happens? I mean, if you have a family, your family life gets left out, and
mm,
or you might not get time to recharge. Now, I think there has to be like strong harmony. So I would be careful who you get advice from, number one, and make sure that
yes.
they really align with your attitudes, values, and beliefs. So that's one thing. And then, breaking the pattern of thinking that you have to do everything is also another important. Now, I will say, and from a lot of entrepreneurs, doctors, and business owners that I've coached, you should get your hands dirty to figure out like the key performance metrics, like KPIs, what you kind of need to make things successful. It doesn't matter if it's paid advertising or if it's operations in your business. I mean, if it's leadership, if it's whatever it might be, but you should kind of have a clear standard operating procedure and metrics to go by. So you could train a monkey to do whatever and understand, though, this is where we have to be. So let's say, for example, training somebody on Facebook advertising and doubling their profits and pitfalls and high leverage areas. Like once you got certain things down, you can apply that to a lot of other channels for sure, and then take the guideline, and even if you delegate it to X agency, at least you're going to know now. You don't need to spend $1,000 on a campaign to figure out if it's going to be profitable or not. You can kind of get some ideas really early on, and you can have them go along with your guide. So it's been a big mistake for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners to not be able to measure and track and get their hands dirty, and also to follow people that don't necessarily, they think they align on the surface, but they really, really don't, because what their internal life is kind of chaotic. But you want freedom and flexibility, yet it's just the what does Gentempo say? Contradiction leads to destruction. It's and
Mm-hmm.
it's so true. So you really have to be careful.
Yeah. I think that's super powerful, especially the alignment of what you want. Because I think, the grass is always greener on your neighbor's lawn, right? Instead of yours. And we start following these people, especially with all the social media. And here we are down this rabbit hole, and we've been successful, or we've created some success, and then we stop and we're like, this is not what I want. Like, and so to get super clear on what you want, I think is a powerful message. Even myself, I find myself asking this question on for sure a weekly and sometimes a daily basis. It's like, what do I want? And just that powerful question, and how many people can answer that clear with clarity.
Yeah, the beautiful thing is you can paint your own canvas, right? That's
Yes.
that's you. You can
Mm-hmm.
decide if I want to have, 4 hours a day for my family, involving them in the business or doing X thing. Like, you can create this, but you have to be very conscious about doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but you bring up a great point. You can't hit a moving target, or you have to have some target and very clear and defined. So the better you can lay that out. In my book, I don't recall which chapter it was, but I gave an example of, let's say you wanted to live a certain lifestyle. I talked about financially reverse engineering what you need to do in terms of how many courses would you have to sell every single day. And I gave this example. You want this house, maybe you want a nanny, private air travel, all these different things. And you say, oh my gosh, that's only 40 something thousand dollars a month. I thought it was going to be millions of dollars every month.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. So I get my number, and then I said, well, how many coaching programs, courses, how many businesses do I acquire? Like, all these things are going through my mind to meet this goal. But to your point, specificity is king, and you have to know where you're going.
I 100% agree. So I'm going to have you, if it's okay with you, I'd love to walk through like an example. Let's go through someone like just starting out. They've never done paid advertisements before. And then let's do somebody who's done some, dabbled a little bit, and then scaling. What are probably two separate questions here, but for the beginner who's never really had any paid advertising or much marketing online, what would you tell them to do? How would you tell them to start?
Number one, simple is always better. I see so many beginners. There's a time and place to go with different systems and platforms that they can absolutely make your life easier in the long term, for sure. But I think there's a temptation to get all this techie, geeky stuff up front versus simple. Like, I know very successful people that have just been successful organic content wise. They
Mm,
have millions and millions of video views. They just blew up because the niche, the right time, the right message, because they were consistent, and they mastered some things. They didn't even really know that they mastered those things. One is the art of storytelling, because if you can tell a good story, you can hook people in from the beginning. So I don't care if it's a video, if it's an article or content, you've got a very small window at the beginning, the first sentence or two of what you write, or in a video, the first 5 seconds or less. They call it a hook, to get somebody engaged with your content, to stop them from scrolling. This is a very um, attention deficit related world, right? I mean, people just they're scrolling nonstop, and so their minds, it is very hard. So you got to get good at either asking questions,
mm,
hitting them with a pattern interrupt early on that makes them think in their mind. Like, a couple of my favorites are, before you even think about getting back surgery, read this first. Before you even think, like, those will get somebody to actually, before I even think about doing it. It's like consumer guide oriented, for instance.
mm-hmm.
Asking a question, or at something. Have you ever wondered how, boom, you can't not answer the question in your mind? Now, some people also like to use props in videos or do edutainment style, but I'm all for really going with how, like, your authentic, real personality. I mean, if you're not a funny person, you don't have to be by any means, but just realize that there is that camera presence. So the first 5 seconds, written and or video, is critically important from a beginner. If you master that alone, you're going to get the attention on your content. And if there's a clear call to action or direction you want them to take, you're going to get subscribers, you're going to get email opt-ins, you might even get sales. new clients and whatnot. I know people that have built multi-million dollar businesses of just doing that alone. Simple things, no sophisticated funnels, right? Next level up might be where you say, hey, I got some traction doing the simple stuff, and I just hit 5, 6 figures or whatever the number is. So maybe I'm going to involve, whether it's ClickFunnels, high level, these programs that I can strategically build more of a funnel and a business. And by the way, you can involve these earlier on. But I just find if you can't make the simple work, you're likely not going to make the sophisticated work. And then once you start driving paid advertising and traffic, then you can start to track things like, okay, well, I've got 100 opt-ins today. How many of them converted into sales? Or I've got 1,000 visitors. Nobody opted into my recipe guide or free offer and whatnot. But, if you lead, I don't care where along the expert level you are, but if you always lead with value and you try to be an asset to the market that you want to serve, that goodwill goes a long way. It's just with any strategic business, you need to have a combination of the now, like people coming in now through the pipeline, opt-in sales, and then the long-term branding element. Depending on how big your market and your niche is, will determine. I used to think the branding was kind of for bigger corporations, right? Because I don't have that much money to spend on branding. I need people now through my doors, or I got to get some sales now to do all this and that. However, let's say your market is 200,000 people. You're doing local advertising, for instance. It wouldn't even take you that long to really hit a tipping point to where everyone just sees you, they know who you are, they've heard your story, and that produces a separate referral based on it creates a separate life of its own, basically, and you become a household name. Same thing if I'm selling a course online nationally. If my audience is 5 million people, that's my core audience. One side of the equation, I got to get really, really well known as an asset, somebody that provides value with them. And then the other side, I'm trying to at least bring people into my list right now and or get the immediate sale.
I love that. There's a couple points that really stuck out for me, and what I've had to learn the most and have been, I would say, harder lessons for me is being authentic. I feel like I've always been authentic, but it's like, oh, well, what will my audience like? What will my audience, instead of truly just being like, you know what? I don't really care what everyone thinks. The people that are aligned with me and how I think, those are going to be the people that actually show up. Those are going to be the people that are my audience. And those are going to be the people that I actually want to interact with and want to serve. And I think that's super powerful when you're thinking about your audience, is you're not going to please everyone, right? You don't want to.
No.
And someone once told me, purposely split the audience. And that was super powerful to me, to be like, you know what? It's okay if people don't agree with me. But when you show up truly authentic to your brand and who you are and what you represent, there's other people like you, and they're going to show up too with that. And that clarity, in my opinion, will expedite that growth just in itself, because you're not mulling and trying to show up for other people. You're truly being aligned with who you are and what you want.
100%. And I remember when you're on video the first time, for example, it's really good therapy, because you realize the ums, the ahs, maybe you wave your hands a little too often, and a lot of the blah gets in the way of the communication. And then after that stuff's taken care of, you realize I don't really sound as natural as I should. Sometimes people have a very difficult time speaking to an inanimate object, right? And that comes with practice. But what I used to do is I used to have my wife get behind the camera, because I'm comfortable talking with her. And every time she did, my guard was down and I was speaking like I am with you today. And people can kind of see who I am. I've seen so many times where somebody's got a great content, great message, but when they turn the camera on, it's just, even if it's 90% of who you are, it's not 100%. You got to be 100%. And that's inhibitory. And I can detect those things, but you're going to subconsciously push people away. So it is important to really connect with why you're doing this, who you want to help, and know your ideal client avatar. And a lot of times they are exactly like you. You're going to be able to influence them easier, because they see you doing these things. They see you're a mom of 2 kids. They see that you're in the trend. You get them. And that being able to have that authenticity come through on camera, even if you have the perfect marketing messages on the sales pages, if you can make it come through on camera, I mean, everything goes up like you said.
I love it. Yes. A couple more questions before we are going to wrap up today. But what is one habit, practice, or boundary that you have fiercely protected now? Not for productivity's sake, but because it keeps you aligned with your life that you have intentionally built.
There's two things. One of them is the mastermind. So I'm in 4 separate masterminds myself, aside from having my own mastermind. Relationship capital for me is non-negotiable because you could take everything away from me today, everything, and I could build it back tomorrow because I have very strategic relationships and I put the time in. I'm always showing up. I mean, last 5 years, I've really like doubled and tripled down, and it's hard to put a price tag on how much that's really meant. Getting known by your mentors and people like speed dial, like it's just wild, and getting connected. At the end of the day, life's not fair. Everyone knows that, right? And there's that old saying about it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. I'm not trying to fight everything. Now you need to be intelligent with your content. You need to be, of course, smart and be able to serve your niche. But when you're in service to other people and you build strategic relationships, that's the highest thing on the food chain you could possibly do. Because X person might just think of you like, oh, I know Ashley, whatever, this other influencer, she's got a list of 100,000 people. I can't believe I didn't connect you guys earlier. Boom. And like that, things can happen. So the relationship capital for me, like that's just non-negotiable. And I show up to events. I'm involved heavily with the groups that I'm involved with because I want to help, and I've seen massive benefit. I mean, the second thing, obviously, is time. I'm really non-negotiable about my time. I do have gatekeepers that are militant about that, and I choose to do things that I want to do because it's very easy to say yes to a lot of things. And when you're just starting out, that's cool. You need to get your name out there. You need to get a feel for what's working, what's not. But in the world, you find that there are a lot of takers, people that they just want to do X. They just want to pick your brain. They don't want to add any value to your life. They just want to do this and that. And you need to filter out those that are serious, that really want to help themselves, versus those that are just kicking tires and not going to do anything with it. Because as a coach, as a consultant, or if you've got something of value to add to the world, the worst thing in the world is to give that person a certain degree of advice that will change their lives and they will never act on it. Family is a great example of this, right? They still look at you as little Ashley or little Matt, and I've literally given cousins of mine information. I've charged people $25,000 for a day to sit with me for. I said, listen, I've given you this. You can take this, build your own business, but all these things. Guess what was done with it? Nothing. And it's just, what they're missing out on. What they're capable of. So it's just, again, spend the time with people that are going to facilitate personal growth and development in your own life, depending on where along the journey you are. And you're going to have to cut ties with people, even sometimes family, that just aren't aligned with where you want to go.
And that's hard,
Sure.
because I think even in practice, I look at some patients still, or in coaching, or even in family, is you can see that potential in them. You can almost like visualize if they just make a change, but you can't make that change for them, what their life could be like. And to be able to disconnect from that and literally just focus on what you can and cannot, or what you can control, because you can't control everything, is hard, but it's freeing all at the same time. It gives you so much more freedom to just, in our family, we say, watch your own bobber, right? Like to really just be a little bit selfish and, look at your life and your family. So love that. All right. I end every podcast episode with a guest with this question. So what's one piece of advice you'd give our audience trying to love their lives and themselves more fully?
Don't take things so personally, especially get online, right? When you start to make some waves, you're going to get people that come out of the woodwork, some guy or gal sitting on his mom's toilet that's 53, never left the house, just finding a reason to hate. Like the first time I got a negative review, for example, on my my book Social Media Made Me Rich. Felt like a punch in the stomach because you
Mm-hmm.
put, I mean, it's 500 something pages. You put just your heart and soul into this,
Mm-hmm.
what I felt was a masterpiece. Like, man, this is great, tactical. And somebody, I think they even said in the listing that they didn't read the book or something, and Amazon still allowed it. Now, I just felt so crushed at that point in time. Now, the bigger you get, the more negativity, the haters, but it's still so small as opposed to those, like it's 0.001%, right, of the 99% that love the work than what you put out. So I would not get distracted by the haters and the negativity, and don't spend all day trying to fight in the comment section and do all these things. You have to protect your time and also your thinking process, because if you don't, that's gonna,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like a hangover where you just don't feel right for a day or two afterward, and then you just totally wasted that whole session. So I would have loved to give myself that advice earlier down the in my life. And some videos I've had, dozens of views. I just had a video that eclipsed 34 million views,
Wow.
us in Vegas, and you're gonna get haters. I don't, even the ones that have a few video views, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, most people will, they'll genuinely resonate with your message and focus on serving them. And I think that that's just one of the best things that I wish I would have told myself earlier.
I love that. I've had to tell myself that multiple times. There was a coach that once told me, they said, or maybe I read it in a book, I can't remember where it came from, but they said people are going to talk regardless of what you say, and people are going to think regardless of what you say. And you might as well say what you want to say, right?
Exactly.
Because they're going to talk no regardless.
100%.
So, mm-hmm. All right, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show with us. As we part our ways, tell the audience where can we find you, and is there anything exciting you have coming up that our audience should know about? Any socials or websites, etc., of where we can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me, ask me questions at Matthew Loop on all social media channels, Instagram, Facebook. I'm probably most active over there. We actually have our Social Media Revenue Summit coming up August 16th. That's here in Atlanta at the Porsche Experience Center. And the link is profit365.org/SMRS. So I'm going to be doing a half-day training with like the business building and growth. The second day is multiple streams of income, creating that on top of your business. But it's an amazing event. Plus, we do a Porsche experience the day before, and I love connecting with people one-on-one. So those are the two prominent ways. And like I said, I'm here to help and support you any way that I can. But lots of opportunity right now.
Awesome. And I can tell the audience from personal experience that I have been to that event down at the Porsche Experience twice. And oh my gosh, it's incredible. Not only the actual content, I mean, the content is just super powerful, but it's really neat to be at the Porsche Experience and experience the actual venue too, which is neat. And you can ride Porsches around if you really want to.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, we're kind of fortunate. I mean, and we attract high 6, 7 figure earners. It's a very high quality room to be in. Combination of mastermind coaching clients. I talk about the trends, where the puck is moving, the growth strategies that are working right now. So from a lot of different angles, putting yourself in the right rooms, I think it's a fantastic training and seminar.
yeah, I agree. Just like what we talked about. So you surround yourself with your relationship capital. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I know that the audience got so many nuggets. I can't wait to connect with you at a later date. But thanks again, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you so much for your time. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for tuning in to Love Your Life and Yourself. I hope today's episode gave you one more tool or one more truth to help you thrive in your health, happiness, and resilience. Remember, loving yourself isn't selfish, it's leadership. And it's the foundation for building a life that actually feels like yours. If this spoke to you, hit that follow button, leave a review, and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. And if you want to dive even deeper, grab a copy of my #1 best-selling book, Love Your Life and Yourself. It's the heart behind this podcast, and it's helped thousands of women step into a life they actually love. You can find it at drashleyrath.com or through the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care of you and keep choosing to love your life and yourself.